First of all, please introduce yourself to our audience of Aurora Fellowship.
Sure. My name is Elena Messina, and I view my job as enabling robots to be used by more people more easily. So I have an engineering background. I would say I consider myself a systems engineer because robotics is such a systems problem. You have to think about all of these types of technologies that have to work together. So my interests have been in trying to understand what robots need to do that they cannot currently do yet, and translate those requirements into measurable things, like, what are the metrics for a particular capability? How would you set up a test to see how far along a spectrum of performance a robot is towards achieving this goal? So if you have this infrastructure with metrics and ways to evaluate and capture the performance, ideally quantitatively, then you can start communicating both with the developers who are trying to augment their systems and the intended end users who can better understand what is really available versus what is just marketing. So those are, the areas that interest me.
How would you describe your research field to someone who knows nothing about it?
Yeah, it's not easy to do that, but yeah, I would say that we try to understand what are the gaps in capabilities, or we try to come up with ways to communicate what can and can't be done by a certain system. So, for example, if you buy a car, there are specifications that are trustworthy, generally speaking, about, anything from the size of the trunk, how much stuff can you carry, that matters. But that's a completely different aspect of a car than, its acceleration, for example, or its, utilization of gasoline, or, if it's electric. Those are like very different dimensions of a vehicle, but as consumers, we are used to being able to trust that data, the specification. So what I try to do when I was at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, is to come up with ways that everybody is comfortable with measuring and understanding what a system can and can't do, so they can make more informed decisions about applying a robot, for example, to their particular needs.
In what ways are we, the society, benefiting from the robotic systems today? And if you personally are looking forward to some next goal in robotics, for example.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So, there is a lot of benefit to being able to automate a lot of tasks. This is an overused phrase, but I'll use it, the dull, dirty, dangerous, right? Those are good choices for trying to apply robots and automation. There's, if you think about manufacturing, there's a lot of, boredom and also injuries for repetitive motions for the factory workers. And if a robot can, work round the clock tirelessly to do certain things that are super repetitive, that frees up the human to, use their brain more and not just their poor shoulders and joints day in and day out.
Right.
So I think that's definitely a benefit. And, some other benefits that come from that is that generally, robots can be much more precise. And so you can have more, reliable quality in the products. Obviously, for other applications, like, the dangerous ones, like you want to send if you have a collapsed building, ideally, the first entry into that is from a robot that can, send information back to the humans so that they can plan a safe approach. The humans are still in control. They still take in the information and make decisions about how to deal with this situation. But they, so they can do it more safely. Sending a human being into a building that recently collapsed is very dangerous for them,
Oh, yeah.
needless to say. So this way they can at least assess the situation and figure out, what the best entryway is, where things need to be shored up and so forth. So those are a few examples of benefits of automation.
What are your feelings on the ethical issues that arise with the use of robotics?
Yeah, that is a whole big area. There's various aspects that need to be concerned, that we should be concerned with. Obviously, the example that I think a lot of people jump to is lethality. Okay, if you have a military defense, type of robotic application, what if, or law enforcement, um, should a robot be able to decide to fire on somebody?
Yeah.
And that, hopefully we're not going to breach that very anytime soon. The idea is that the robot, even in these, battlefield situations, should just be providing data, situational awareness to the human commanders who, can then make the decisions. And then, they can tell the robot to, shoot somebody or fire a missile or whatever, but it's a human that's in the loop. On, you know, we talked about the autonomous vehicles. I think I really, I haven't been following it super closely recently for self-driving vehicles, but I'm starting to feel concerned about this lack of education by the consumers that buy these vehicles. And, that becomes an ethical issue. Are you providing all of the information that these, drivers and new owners need in order to wisely use the vehicles and wisely use the automation that's on them? And then finally, there's, another example is this very big area of the use of artificial intelligence. So as, you might expect, obviously, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so forth is becoming a big part of robotics. And there's a lot of concern about the algorithms, the way they're trained, and they will have built-in biases, about things like, what's a human, what's a human skin color, for example, and so forth, that is, a whole other can of worms. And so, people are aware of this, and I guess they're trying to work on it. But these are, just different aspects of the ethics concerns that exist now.
How did you decide that you wanted to do that job? Where does your passion come from?
Yeah. So, as an old person, when I went into college, I was very interested in writing software. But again, back then, they didn't even have computer science departments at most universities.
Yeah.
So I got into the College of Engineering, and, because that's where there was some programming. And then, I was, my major was engineering science. So it was very broad, and I got exposed to a lot of the different disciplines in engineering. And I still, I couldn't settle on, one particular area because I kind of liked them all and I liked how they all interacted. And then when I was a junior or senior, like towards the end, I saw that there were evening classes in robotics. They were graduate level classes, but I signed up anyway. And that's when it was like, it clicked. Okay, this is it. Robotics is where I can do everything, a little bit of everything. And so that's when I decided to, you know, uh, proceed in that direction. And I worked for a industrial robotics company for a few years. Then I got away from it. I went to work at a company that was developing solid modeling products for computer-aided design, computer-aided
Okay.
manufacturing. So that was a good exposure to, the simulations and virtual representations. We didn't call it that then, but it's digital twin, and so forth. And then several years later, I had an opportunity to join the US National Institute of Standards and Technology, which brought me back into robotics. And it's been great. I spent more than a couple of decades there, and I got to work on, for the military, self-driving vehicles, but then also, emergency response robots. And then most recently, I've been focused on advancing what we call measurement science for manufacturing robotics. So I've gotten to learn about a lot of different fields of application. It was very interesting. I've been
Yeah.
very fortunate.
I'm sure that they will be pleased to have some any piece of advice from you for their, I don't know, maybe future studies or
Mhm.
uh, any kind of decision they might be facing in the next years.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think it's a great area to go into, and it will be for the foreseeable future. So, but it's rapidly changing. There's I think greater computation, a lot of availability of data, for example, has enabled and advanced a lot of algorithms. So, my advice to them is to you know at least sample the different disciplines. So for example, mechanical engineering can be a key aspect of a lot of automation, clearly. But then, you you also need to incorporate sensing. So they might want to look at, I guess often it's computer science departments or electrical engineering. I guess now there's robotics majors too. So sensing is very important. It's not just camera-based visual, it could be tactile sensing, integration
Yeah.
of multiple sensor signals and, to try to produce higher level information. So and of course the software underlying all of it. So I guess my point is that they should, try to understand which areas they really like, to try to understand the interactions between things like a, mechanical system that might have embedded sensors, but also has to tie into a control loop, and figure out, can things all come together within the necessary control cycle time and so forth. So those are like the basic underlying technologies, and then they might want to try to understand what is their passion about the application domain. Could be agricultural robotics. May feel
Okay.
like this is an area where you can actually one of the intended benefits of it, of agricultural robotics, could be to use less fertilizer, less pesticides, kind of optimize so it's
Okay.
better for the environment, for example. Or it could be, manufacturing robotics, helping strengthen the manufacturing base in their country, but doing so in a way that the robots and the humans work together. So that brings in another area that I think personally is very important, which is the human robot aspect, the interaction. How do you communicate with a robot? How can you ask it to do something, without having to spend days and days painstakingly programming it? So that's an area that needs a lot of work to really advance the capabilities overall. So, there's like a whole menu. It's a buffet of things that people can look at, and I really would recommend that they, try to sample a little bit of each to understand at least somewhat what they bring to the party, and trying to specialize after that.
Should people be ready to, I don't know, change their job sometimes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had several jobs, so I think it's good because it gives you a perspective, and your experience, not just in the technology, but just the cultural. Each company has a different culture,
Yeah.
and working in a team. That's another thing I haven't mentioned, but that's a huge aspect of any of the work that I've been involved with, is that you have to be able to work in a team environment. It could be, both people who also work, for instance, at NIST, but also people outside. And so, having the experience to, you know, deal with, different levels of people in different organizations is important. Plus, you gain experience on the technologies that you can also apply at your new job. So I'm I wouldn't job hop every year, but,
Yeah.
like, especially when you're younger, it gives you a good opportunity to either, travel, move to a different city, or, just experience something and decide if it's for you.